The reading of Jesus in the Bible is very intense. I come not to bring peace, but a sword. But as he's talking about setting father against son and mother against child, what he's really talking about is inner renunciation and that austerity of being faithful and true to one's own path and treading that path with all your energy and all your magnetism, all your faith and trust, being firm. That sword he's talking about is the sword of discrimination, to live in that truth with firmness, as the Gita said, firm-mindedness. That's the point. So those words, though, austerity and the Sanskrit word tapasya or sacrifice, renunciation, those are big words, and they have a daunting connotation to them. We think of yogis smeared with ash in the Himalayas, lying on a bed of nails, or standing on one leg for years at a time, practicing these intense austerities to build spiritual power, to build their strong will. So it's very intense stuff. But we need to bring those words off their pedestal and into our own lives, into the moment-to-moment choices that we make, and make them accessible, make them part of our hearts. Dharmadas ji and I just had a few days of seclusion, our first seclusion in about 3 years, so we were very happy to have that moment. And I secluded in our house, and Dharmadas went to a friend's house who was away for a while. So we both had that quiet for a few days. Much too short, but anyway. And one of the things that I love to do in seclusion is just a small austerity, my-sized austerity, and that's just to keep silence, to not say a word for days. And even for just those few days, I could feel the spiritual power in that little austerity. God rewards us with every effort that we do, everything we try to give to Him. He rewards us. So I love that Sri Yukteswar, the guru of Yogananda, had a wonderful definition of austerity, a very down-to-earth and accessible definition. He said, austerity is patience. Austerity is even-mindedness in the midst of all circumstances. Now imagine that. Somebody's yelling at you, and you remain even-minded. You don't yell back or kick him in the shins or any of that. Just remain even-minded, all circumstances, even amidst the crash of breaking worlds, Yogananda said. So this is an austerity that we can get our minds around, being patient in all circumstances, even-minded in all circumstances. And thinking of patience, there's a little story of an experiment that was done with 4-year-old children. And this was in studying human behavior, consciousness studies. And so this experiment is called the marshmallow test. And what was done in the marshmallow test is that each little child was led into a room where they would be alone. And the room was, by the way, very plain. The walls were white, everything was white. There was just a little table and a chair for them to sit at. Very plain, no color, nothing to look at, just empty. And the facilitator went in with the child and showed them two plates, two plain white paper plates. And on one paper plate was one marshmallow. And on the other plate, there were two marshmallows. So the bottom line of this is the child could have one marshmallow now or two marshmallows later if they waited. Okay, so that's the point of this. So the facilitator would say, okay, now I'm going to leave this paper plate with the one marshmallow here on the table in front of you. And I'm going to take this other paper plate with two marshmallows, and I'm going to take this away with me because I'm going to go do something in the other room. Now, if you can wait and not eat this one marshmallow until I get back, then instead of one, you can have two. But if you find, after you've waited for a while and you just can't wait anymore, here's a little bell, and he put one of those bells that you hit on the table next to the marshmallow. You just hit the bell, and I'll come right back, and then you can have that one marshmallow, okay? And so the kid goes, yeah, okay. And the facilitator goes off, and this is all filmed. This is all filmed. So you see footage of the little kids. And so there's the one little girl, and she's staring at the marshmallow. And the facilitator goes out, shuts the door, she grabs the marshmallow and puts it in her mouth. Doesn't ring the bell, doesn't do anything. It's just see the marshmallow, the seafood diet, you see food and you eat it. And then there's the little boy that is trying so hard not to eat the marshmallow. And he's doing everything. He's closing his eyes, he's covering his eyes. And the only thing in the whole room that could possibly be of interest is the little bell. So he's playing and fiddling with the little bell. He's not ringing it, but he's testing it, trying to get something to distract his mind. And finally the facilitator comes in, and he's so happy. Oh my gosh, I made it. I get two marshmallows instead of one. And then you see a split screen, and you see 4 of the children who were able to wait, who were able to be patient, who did their little austerity. And you see all 4 of them, what they were doing to sort of engage their willpower and really trying not to give in to this temptation of the marshmallow. You see all 4 of them, and they're doing the same things. They're either closing their eyes or covering their eyes, and they're all completely twisted around in their chair to avoid looking at the marshmallow. So this was 40 years ago that this experiment happened, and they followed these children, and they found that the children who could wait got better jobs, happier home life, felt more fulfilled. They were able to practice self-control, even though it was really hard. It was very cute to watch, but very pathetic, because adults are not that different from the marshmallow. They want that too. But in these kinds of studies of consciousness, people found, when they started the studies, they thought, Well, everything we do is conscious. Everything we say, the actions we perform, it's all conscious. We are conscious. But as they did the studies, they found that more and more what we do, how we behave, is largely automatic. If you think of somebody driving down the car, they've got their earpiece in, they're talking on the phone, maybe the radio's on, they have the GPS telling them directions, maybe they have a milkshake that they're drinking. There's all these things, the kids are in the back seat, there's all these things happening. A lot of what is going on is automatic. But these researchers found that there was one thing in particular that was very conscious. Now think for a minute, what would that be? One thing that's extremely conscious, and that is where we put our attention, moment to moment. We choose what we focus on. In every moment, we have that choice. Many times the discussion comes up about karma versus free will. How much of our lives is dictated by this looming weight of karma, and how much choice do we really have in our lives? And here's the answer. We choose moment to moment to moment where we put our attention, what we focus on. We make choices all the time which create our karma, which create the habits that dictate our lives. So are we going to go to the spiritual program, or are we going to watch TV and eat a pint of ice cream? That's the kinds of choices that we make every single moment. We were having a study group recently for Swami Kriyananda's Success and Happiness course. And his description of karma was so powerful. Because I have thought of karma as this looming weight, but what he was saying about it was very liberating. He said, karma is the loving hand of God, steering us in the right direction through punishment and reward. You do the good thing, you get the reward. You do the bad thing, you suffer the consequences. So karma is that steering hand of God, leading us to do the right thing. And further, he said, when we've suffered enough from doing the wrong actions, we develop the willingness to be disciplined. Otherwise, we just grab the marshmallow and put it in our mouth. There's no discipline involved. You just want this, you grab it. But after we suffer the consequences enough, we start being willing to work, to be disciplined, to follow the right course of action. And in that way, we start creating good karma and nullifying the bad karma, which helps us to get free. So it's a very beautiful concept. And I'm running over time, so I was also asked to talk a little bit about what we did for the Joy-a-thon. So I'm going to just invite my husband up here, and against his will. And the first year, the Joy-a-thon is a tradition in Sacramento, and so the first year we were here, we walked 108 times around a quarter-mile track. So we walked 27 miles. So the next year, we walked 108 miles. And then this year, we decided we would start right after last year's Joy-a-thon, and we walked 1,008 miles. So I'll just conclude by saying that it was wonderful, and it's so good for your health. It's such a good thing to do, to walk. And to do it for Ananda gave me incentive to make sure that I did it. I did it even in seclusion. I would go out every morning and do my walk and come back into seclusion. So it gave me that discipline of, oh, I have to do this for Master. I'm not just doing it for myself. There's a responsibility here. I have to get these 1,008 miles in. So we would like to invite any of you who would feel so inclined to maybe join us next year in 2017. You don't have to walk 1,008 miles, but you could walk 500 for the year or something like that. So we'll talk about that.
Okay. I also just wanted to add, the concept of the Joy-a-thon is doing something that brings you joy. And, you know, like we were saying in the affirmation, that I express the joy that I feel from God. And that is so, so important, because we live in a world that, you know, depending on which way you look at it, either seems to be coming apart at the seams or, you know, possibly growing into a new level of consciousness, a new level of awareness. And to be able to be an instrument for expressing something really positive, like the affirmation was today, it's really, really important. So next Saturday we celebrate that day, and we all do something together, and people will be doing things here at the church and over in the community, and we'll probably be walking and chanting and other things. So anyway, come by and join us. It's, you know, whether you do something over the span of a year or a day, or, you know, Tom Cerusi, I think some of you heard last weekend, rode around Lake Tahoe, which is his traditional thing. He has to do it in September so the weather's good. But, you know, whatever we do, we offer to God, and it's very sweet and really, really quite fun to share together. So.
And if it's raining, which it might be, we'll send out an email and we'll have Plan B. We'll probably have lunch over here at the church or something like that.
I wanted to speak a little to the topic today also. This Bible passage, as Nirmala pointed out, is a challenging one and very susceptible of misinterpretation or just simply lack of understanding. What on earth is he talking about? When I read that passage, my first thought was, now wait a minute, I know another passage that seems to directly contradict that, and I actually looked the thing up. My peace I leave with you. This is from John 14, I think it's verse 27. My peace I leave with you, not as the world gives you, do I give unto you. Let not your hearts be troubled, nor let them be afraid. And now you would think, if just hearing those two without sort of pulling them apart a little bit, you would think, well, now, wait a minute, that contradicts. He says, I come not to bring peace, but a sword, and set, families all against each other, and, disaster, dire fears, etc. I mean, you sort of think, what on earth is he talking about? But partly what he was saying is, I didn't come here to make a peaceful little place for everybody to go to sleep. for this lifetime. I came to challenge people. And yes, on an outward level, it's interesting. Nirmala gave the examples, the first two examples, which is the father against the son against the father and the mother against the daughter. Well, she neglected the third one is the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. And oh my goodness, that one conjures up all sorts of challenges. But you think that's the outward side of it. Yes, there are times when the family is not able to sort of understand what is your soul calling you to do. I read a story recently. It's a very current story, actually. And it's about a lady who is one of the best soccer players for those who are football players, for those who are not so American in consciousness, soccer player for the U.S. women's national team. And I'll think of her name in just a moment. No. No. Well, anyway, it'll come. I had it. But anyway, her story was interesting because she was cut from the national team when she was 22 and was devastated by this and thought, well, that's it. I just have to, I'll finish my degree. I have to just give this all up. And her dad said, why don't you call this trainer and just at least have an interview with this guy and see what he has to say. And so she thought, she said, of course I didn't call right away. I waited and I waited and I waited, but I did finally call the guy. And he said, all right, well, come and meet me at such and so time. And so he did a workout with her, and she demonstrated her skills first, and she was exhausted by the time she finished demonstrating her skills. And then afterwards, he said, okay, now we're going to test your endurance. She was like, good God. And so, then he had her run different lengths, and then he gave her his assessment. And he said, by your skills, you could be on the national team. You could make a real contribution. Then he went on to say, but you're not in shape, and your attitude is bad. Everybody else is to blame for your problems. Whatever it is, there's always an excuse. It's always somebody else's fault. And he said, if you are going to work with me, it has to be 100%. It cannot be 80%. And if I call you at some hour of the day or night, you need to be ready to say, yes, we'll do it. I'll train. And she said, I didn't like hearing what he said, but I recognized that there was truth in it, and I said yes. And she went ahead with it. And Carly Lloyd, by the way, knew it would come back to me. And she trained with him for several years. They went on to tremendous success. She scored the only hat trick, the only 3-goal performance by a woman in a World Cup final in the history of the game. 1 gold medals, etc. And after one of these tremendous successes, I think they won the World Cup, the very day afterwards, he called her up. Got to go train. He said, it's exactly when everybody else thinks, time to go sit on the beach. That's when you have to go do it. The interesting thing, and actually the point of the story, was that this drove her apart from her family. Her family couldn't accept that this had turned into her priority, even though they had supported her all the way along to get her into the position where she could be successful. Somehow it sort of separated her away from her family. And it struck me so much in connection with this topic today, because this is just a world, you could call it a worldly activity. She's playing a game, she's doing it very successfully. She's studying under a mentor, which is almost like a guru, really, in a sense, because she really took training from him on it was not just, okay, do this exercise, okay, work on that skill, etc. I mean, he really trained her consciousness, and yet it separated her from her family, and a struggle which continues to this day. okay, that's an outward example of it. But there's a deeper level to this. And this, I think, is even more pertinent to what Christ was saying in the reading. He's saying, you also have to separate yourself from your lower consciousness, from where you came, which in a sense is your ancestors, or the ancestors in your consciousness, which is your past. You have to use the sort of discrimination to say, you know what, I'm moving away from that now. And there's going to be all sorts of resistance to that when that moment comes. Because the past doesn't just lay down and roll over and go away, blow away. It stands up and goes, wait a minute, this is who we are now. We're not going there. You can't do that. There's this whole little Greek chorus chanting in the background. You're no good. You can't finish. You could, whatever, fill in the blank. So we have to learn, and I love that Swamiji paired the Bhagavad Gita reading with this, where the sage is even-minded under all circumstances, treating alike friend and foe, chance comer, looking at the clod of earth, the bar of gold, etc., all the same, all equal. Why? Because there's so much joy in his heart that there's no room for any sense of lack or limitation. There's no room for the sense of, oh, well, gosh, I guess I'm not good enough, or, oh, I guess I should grab the gold and leave the clod of earth. No, there's this sense that the whole universe is valuable and full of God's presence, and there's no point in the universe that's more or less of God's presence. There's light everywhere. Master said to the disciples once, as he was returning from chanting, I believe it was when he recorded one of his chanting albums back in the 1930s, he said, you have no idea how beautiful you all are to me. I see you all as light, golden, beautiful light, shining light. And that's what our being is. We are literally made out of light. I was saying this in the fire ceremony today also. The light that is projecting us onto the screen of this play, of this duality. It's the light of God. So let us acknowledge that light. And yes, there is a bit of sternness to it. There is a bit of stainless steel involved, shall we say. There's a spine required in order to follow this. But it's a path of joy. Our name, Ananda, sort of gives you a hint that that's where we're headed. It doesn't mean that it's always outwardly fun. It can be challenging. Getting up in the morning to go to sadhana is not always, sometimes that pillow just seems like, ooh, just a few more minutes, which of course could turn into a few more hours, but we have the chance to know God in this lifetime. We just have to take it. Remember what Nirmala was saying. Where you put your attention is always your choice. Choose wisely, and you can have deep, deep fulfillment. I'm also reminded, she was telling the marshmallow story, I'm also reminded of a study, I won't go into long detail about it, similar study done, except in this case it was children planting a garden and raising that garden and carrying it all the way through to fruition meaning literally when the fruit comes or when the plants are ready to harvest. And same kind of results, except in a way even more deep, because the marshmallow test was a matter of a few minutes. I mean, it's impressive that it had those results over the span of decades. But the garden experiment lasted months and months. It took weeks and months for those plants to grow up. So in our lives, yes, there may be some austerity to saying, well, not just now, but later. But there's God in every moment. Let's find God in every moment.